just start with a bit of music and a style that particularly has lots of influence from everywhere, and that's more or less about what we plan to talk. This is Camerata Caipira. We are a group from Brasilia, so in the middle of nowhere there in Brazil. But I see that has received people from around Brazil and has a very special history. And we've been traveling a little bit doing this lecture and also playing, and we have noticed that people are very curious about Brazil. There's a certain level of knowledge of our country, but when you get down to the formation of Brazil and down to what made Brazil, let's say, in some people's eyes, so interesting, then this knowledge is a bit diffuse. And so we prepared a talk that tells the history of the Brazilian music, of the modern Brazilian music, through 150 years ago. And making a parallel with the development of the social development of our country. So we believe that Brazil is one of the few countries that you can really get to know its history by its culture, because the culture is imprinted on our souls in a very deep way. So that's why we thought about playing as well, so it can get also imprinted somehow in everyone's remembering. There's been a long discussion among the Brazilianists, also the historians and the people that talk about culture in Brazil, of when that Brazilian frame of mind was developed, was created. I mean, the historians normally they say, okay, it was when Brazil was colonized by the Portuguese, or some of them say, well, when the king of Portugal, Dom João VI, went to Brazil and brought his kingdom running from Napoleon, and that was a good point. This indeed was a good point. Others say no, when it was slavery was abolished, and all of it is true. But the musicians and some scholars they believe that the Brazilian, the modern Brazilian frame of mind, people and culture that we know nowadays, started on a very specific time frame, in a specific point in Rio de Janeiro, at the end of the 19th century. And that's what we are going to talk tonight. And why? Well, that was a special time all around the world. We are just prior to the change of the century, and it was a kind of a new renaissance, with science being an important thing. Europe was upside down with the new discovering, car and airplanes and everything, and Brazil was we have one thing we're not that proud of, that we are one of the last countries over the world to abolish slavery. And at the same time that we did it in 1988, in 1889, we have we became a republic, and we have a mass immigration coming from Europe. Europe was getting, let's say, at its peak with the Industrial Revolution. It was a lot of poverty going on, so people were going to Brazil in a large mass of people, and it was one of the largest immigrations that we had, and Latin America had, and even America, the whole America had, was at that time. And it happened in a point in Brazil. It was Rio de Janeiro. At the same time, we have in Brasilia, the old capital, we have the Revolta dos Malês. Was a revolt, was the slaves that came from West Africa, from the Islam part of Africa, that were very organized and very, they tried to take over the city. So there was a huge repression, and a good part of these people, very organized, had to flee, and they fled mostly to Rio de Janeiro. So Rio de Janeiro, at the end of the 19th century, was that melting pot that we all talk about when you talk about Brazil. Rio de Janeiro had, for instance, in 1890, have 500,000 people living in there, and in 20 years span, it jumped to 1,100. So it almost doubled its size. When we abolished slavery, we had all this mass of ex-slaves coming from the plantations to the city of Rio de Janeiro, and they have not so much skills to work in a city with lots of different things to do, so they went mainly to work at the harbor, carrying things. The harbor in Rio at the time was not a harbor that you put your ship just besides the pier. No, you had to get into the water with the water like this and carry, things. So there were lots of people were going to live around that center area, and they went to live close to the Zona do Mangue there in Rio, what's close to the harbor. As well, the very poor people that immigrated from Europe, and we had people coming from everywhere, so from Portugal, what we call the modern Brazilian culture, music, and also our very openness frame of mind. Rio de Janeiro was as well becoming the new capital of Brazil, so there was a class of public workers with power of consuming, and also with the free time, what made the culture also flourish as well as we had in the cities in Europe. And we always say in Brazil that everything starts in Bahia and gets worked out in Rio de Janeiro, and it happens as well happened with music. With that Revolta dos Malês, we had the Mães de Santo. Mães de Santo was a very influential person in the community. It was connected to the Candomblé, what is an Afro-Brazilian religion, and more or less what you have in Cuba with the Santeria, you had in Brazil with the Candomblé. And that's Mãe de Santo, the very influential people, and also with some social power, or some money. They move it to Brazil, and they start buying the houses that belong to the old noblesse in Brazil, when the Republic was announced. And those huge houses that they bought start to kind of nourish the nearly ex-slaves that came. And in this house we have like the first Brazilian chemistry in music. Just to illustrate a little bit, maybe you can play, so you feel the change happening in society and in music. You can play one tune that we used to play at the time, from Ernesto Nazaré, a composer from the beginning of the 20th century. Ernesto Nazaré was a composer that, incredible, they say the Brazilian Chopin, but he was a poor guy, and he used to play in a cinema. He was, you have the mute cinema, and he was interpreting behind the screen, and in his notes you even find passages like there was a fire in the screen, so he had always a bucket of water, has to go and try and throw it. So he was a multitask man, but he was one of our best composers, and we played a little excerpt of his work for you to see how much European-oriented Brazilian was at the time, but with a little bit African influence already, eating a little bit of that European thing. Tocar pedaço de outro? Tá entendendo?
As duas partes?
Não, só aberto. And please, let's try to do it in both ways. If you have a comment of a question, just do it right away. Nice, because then we can kind of have a line on itself. Você também, viu? Pode? Pode? Pode. was Odeon. This was Odeon, colonial city. And so they soon start to get together in cent days, so the days that you could do a party. They always use the Brazilian cents, so it was, you cannot forbid that. I'm worshiping St. Peter, all right, so go to the street, make a party. Although they were always worshiping, some of them, or St. Peter, or some other ones, some Orisha from the Candomblé. And they get to the streets and they start to do what we call the ranchos. And it was very soon forbidden. Not only because it was a bit scary for the people of Rio to see, you know, so many ex-slaves all together partying, and the party at the times they were sometimes not as nice, they were heavy, there was also a sort of protest. So it soon got forbidden. As it got forbidden, those we call the, como é que fala, tia mesmo? The aunts, the baianas, as tias baianas, the aunts that came from Bahia, they start to gather those gatherings in their places, those big houses that we were talking about. And there's one, there's always three tias, Tia Amélia, Tia Seata, and there was one composer, a godfather of the Brazilian composers. His name is Pixinguinha. He was a young boy at the time, and he talks a lot about those gatherings. He says, yeah, it was like the whole society was in a house. You had those huge houses, very well set, and in the living room, the tias would be hosting the most influential people of the city, because, you know, also politicians and high-skilled public servants used to go there. So in the living room, you would have white people and mulattoes playing classical music. They would be playing Bach, they would be playing Mozart, they would be playing piano or Spinetta. And in the kitchen, you would have something mixed, something that would look like what the samba is today. And in the garden, you would have people playing, even people that from first generation coming from Africa, because you still had at the time, in the end of the 19th century, you had people that came from Africa at the last wave of slavery. You had those people playing batuques, and in deep in the garden, where there was little bush, you would have someone doing worshiping, I don't know what, como é que fala? Trabalho de candomblé, doing some...
worshipping an Afro-Brazilian god.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Spell.
There you go, a spell. So you have everything at the same time.
Tem uma baiana ali que ela pode...
And of course, the music is something that you cannot close your ears to. So the mix was starting to be done. They say the mix in Brazil happened, the mix of the music in Brazil and the culture happened at the same time that Brazilians mixed, races mixed. And if there's something we don't have a problem in Brazil is to make a mix with our heads. It's very easy and acceptable. And so, but a kind of the class division that we had in society was happening also in these gatherings. So it didn't change that much, but culturally the mix was huge. Well, with time passing by, the ranchos was already permitted. Women started to join it, and even some white people starting to join it, so it was more acceptable. And then it was probably when the samba was created as the Brazilian the Brazilian style of music. You know, that we have that national style. It's the samba. We have a good. There's always some discussion about how the rhythm itself was created. Samba is an incredible rhythm, and some of people say that, yeah, well, you know, the slave masters, they used to mix people from all over Africa. So you would get, in the same farm, you would get people from Angola, come from what's now Angola, and people from West Africa, maybe one from Tanzania, from even Madagascar, the island, even from there they took slaves, and they used to mix because it was easier for them to control. So they would not speak the same language, they would not have the same costumes, they would not look alike, and the worst of all, they would not get the same religion. So very difficult to organize, to get organized. But when they have the Sunday, you know, in Brazil we didn't have that repression as you had in America, that they repressed also the cultural beliefs, religion beliefs. In America it was very heavy. In Brazil it was all right. As long as you work on Sunday, you can do whatever you want. And when they get together, they had to kind of play together as well and dance together. And samba comes a little bit from there. It's like a juice of African cultures, you know, and a very simple rhythm. And maybe we can even talk about the rhythm here. We always say that there cannot be a samba without three elements, you know, like almost like a semiotic explanation. You have that vertical thing that's marked by a big drum called surdo or another similar drums that would be dum, chicka, dum, chicka, dum, chicka, dum, chicka, dum. Something that makes it float. So it would be like quarter notes. If you hit one time, you have to hit 4 things to make quarter notes. Like you go 16 notes, you go tick chicky tick chicky tick chicky tick chicky dum chicky tick fast tick chicky tick chicky tick chicky tick chicky dum dum. Vertical, horizontal, and then something that's very important in African music. If you are listening, especially in West Africa, if you are listening to that polyrhythmy that they play, it's like, wow, what's happening? What a mess. No, if you start, it's really polyrhythmic. So but there's always one guy or a couple of guys that are freaking out. So that's the expression of the individual, not only the mass music, the communal music, but the individual. And in Brazil, we also have. So you say there cannot be a samba without the pose, flow, and an individual click, If you have these 3 elements, you have samba. And there was even one instrument. What is it? That it's not a good example, but cadê o pandeirinho? So, if you have like, você faz aqui pra mim?
O pandeiro?
Não, faz só isso.
Pandeiro não.
Pandeiro não.
Faz só embaixo aí.
Lá.
Lá. Then you have. Nossa, que pandeiro. Não dá pra tocar isso aqui.
Sorry.
Faz lá. Faz o chocalho pra mim. Every beat, just like mathematics, we add 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Fica aí, não vai não. Alright, but why does it sound so nice? No? Not like that, not like the way you play it. You should say, no, it doesn't. No, not the way you play it. Not the way you play, but it sounds nice there because you have those African way of feeling the beat. You know? If you go to Europe, you go to Germany, you let's listen to the folk music. It's go tum tum tum. The strong beat is on the 1. Pumpa 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 1 and 1 again and 1. If you go nice voice in Italy or in Austria, boom da da boom da da 1. Here we go 1 and 1. Everything European is very much on the 1. But if you go to Africa, they love to displace the beat. So samba, although it's so the strong point of the samba is on the 2, not on the 1. So it's already corrupted. No, all your notion of rhythm is already upside down. So you know, we even say that that everyone in the world feels music like this. The Brazilians feel like so sideways. And then you have that, and then you have those syncopes, not only in the main rhythm, the pose. We also have, if a guy is freaking out, soloing on top of it, he will avoid the 1. For example, 1, 2, 3. No, we can even try together to make one. I'm going to play here. Try to clap just afterwards. I'm going to play very, very simple samba pattern. Let's see if it works. Right? Machine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. When it's on the beat, tac, 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 it goes perfect. When it gets syncopated, cat, 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 ta, and then you get a bit out. So what's nice maybe to remember a little phrase. 1, 2, ta, ta, 1, 2, 3, ta, ta. Okay? 1, 2, ta, ta, 1, 2, 3, ta, ta. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. 1, 2, ta, ta, 1, 2, 3, ta, ta. There you go. That's the basic rhythm of samba. See, it goes easy. The syncopes are inside you. Believe it. Let's put it out. So that's what. But we say samba started as a juice of African culture, but also not quite. There was also a very punctual point where it happened in Rio. You had those big parades going on, people playing small instruments, not even tuned, because you didn't have these nice plastic things then. You had to kill an animal. It would be a cat, for instance, you know. During Carnival, no cats on the street whatsoever, because they had to tune with you know. But people were losing control as it was getting too big, too much people playing small instruments. The beat was going everywhere. So in Estácio de Sá, one samba school in Rio, there was one guy, probably a very innovative kind of guy. He said, let's, you know, just like the girls in Rome, let's put huge drums so we can fix the rhythm. And they introduced an instrument we have that's called the surdo. Huge and round, and you cannot miss it. And so it like glued everything together. So samba has also this nice folklore and a fairy tale from the African thing, what's also true, but also very pointed. The people that were working samba in Rio, they were very trying to do it in a very objective and something that would work on the street. So that's a little history of samba, how it got so famous in Rio and then spread all around. Any questions? Vocês também alguma questão?
You're doing really well.
You sure? Can you understand? Because
yeah.
You know, there's you talk and then when you made a mistake, you remember it probably 3 phrases afterwards.
You don't make many mistakes.
I don't. So and then the samba of Estácio de Sá started to be the samba of Rio afterwards. That formula. You know, we are giving a lecture in Sweden, and can I ask something else? Why samba is a mess? What do you mean? Oh, it sounds messy. I said I don't have an answer for that. So for us it doesn't. So the polyrhythm in me, it works very fine altogether. And at the same time, we had in São Paulo something completely different, and later it will glue. São Paulo was always very much European oriented, so São Paulo was having a movement connected to the Dadaist, to the surreal movement in Europe, so to the Spanish and French anarchists. So it was another world going on. Later they are gonna connect, and then we are like advancing in time. We are already in the 20s or the 30s, something there, and something drastically happens in the world. It was the end of the Second World War. There was a flourish thing in Europe. It was like at the end of the war, but the axe of the world moved from Europe to the United States, and that was a big turn in Brazil. Brazil had centuries of looking up towards Europe, and from the 30s on, it started to look up towards America, but always in a very Brazilian way, so not mimicking whatever that comes from outside, but trying to do it in a Brazilian and new and own way. And America also had a very smart and efficient form of seducing other people through its art. And the art in America in the 30s was marvelous. And they have jazz, they had cinema and everything. And in Brazil, they came in with an equipment called the radio. When the radio comes to Brazil, it came not only the radio as a thing, but it came with the phonographic industry, with the new technology, and the records. You know, the records. You had to put it somewhere. So also the equipment came, and with the equipment came the American wonderful music, especially jazz. And when jazz hit Brazil, it hit as a rock. Our revenge was the bossa nova that we sent there. So and in Brazil there was also something happened in the upper layer of politically. We had a guy, one very controversial and president called Getúlio Vargas. He came first into power as with a coup d'état, but he was loved and rated and hated at the same time. But on the cultural level, he was very important. He said, wow, this is not a country. There are 7 countries inside Brazil. We have to unify these people. The only thing that was unifying Brazilians were the Portuguese language, but not the history. There was like countries apart. So he started to promote through his agents of promotion. He was starting to promote people from the down south in Brazil, the northeasterns, the Amazon. He was promoting a Brazil that's so diverse, and there's so much contrast that it would be, that's a blessed country, it's a wonderful country because of our diversity. So they were very keen on it, and it got into our scheme. Every Brazilian that's born nowadays has this thing, oh, we are so diverse, we are so powerful because we have everything, but we are still one. And Getúlio Vargas did it with a good method. One of the methods was to use the radio and pay the radio. The agency was even paying the radios to promote artists from the south or from the northeast. And there was one artist, wonderful, called Luis Gonzaga, who went to Rio. He was a bolero singer. And then they started to shape him up, say, come on, you are from the northeast, you have to behave as a northeastern. You know? So he started dressing typical clothes. There was also Gaúcho da Fronteira from Rio Grande do Sul. And, oh, you know what, talking too much. Let's play one tune from Luis Gonzaga. Quer tocar o Vila Viajante? Vamos lá? Manda ver, enquanto isso eu vou estar estudando.
Vai, você vai tocar.
Vou tocar.
Esquadro.
Andar por este país pra ver se um dia descanso feliz, guardando as recordações nas terras onde passei, andando pelos sertões e dos amigos que lá deixei. Chuva e sol, poeira e carvão, sigo o roteiro, mais uma estação. E a saudade no coração.
powerhouse of culture. You know, when I don't know how was it in New Zealand. Probably was the same phenomenon when there was a time of the radio. You know, that they all get together in the living room. They turn on the radio and they start to look at that and listen to the soap operas and the music. And the radios in Brazil, they belonged to the record companies. So that's something really special as well. And they were financed by the government, they were financed by the record companies, they got money, so they had orchestras and very good scouts. So they went down to the city and found the best arrangers, the best players. They were really powerhouse of culture. And jazz was coming to Brazil. That was a big crossover into Brazilian music. When jazz came, can you imagine what is to listen to the jazz for the first time? If you are from the classical background, you are used to arrangements and everything so well disposed. If you come from the popular music, you are used to the nice and mellow lyrics with sense on it, and then comes Dixieland. So 4 guys improvising at the same time is like a, you know, or either you love it or you hate it. It's heavy, and it hit Brazil as a rock. And Brazilian musicians start to use drum sets and start to play their rhythms with that kind of formation. There was a big change. It happened a lot in the radios itself. And in the radios also were contracting musicians paying per month. And they were trying to, you know, there was even something that didn't come that from above, from Getúlio Vargas' government or anything, but they were trying to create something that would be the national style. And it happened when the musicians that were playing some form of Jurassic samba and the musicians of choro. Choro is a style we have that comes with very strong European influence, with European melodies and a little bit of African influence on it, but mostly European. When they met in the radios, they said, well, they met physically, you know. They were rehearsing a samba group, rehearsing something that looks like a samba. Some guys rehearsing something that looks like a polka or a Scottish, you know. Those choro groups, we call choro is a style called the choro. And when they met, they create that shape that we know nowadays. Brazilian music is pretty much acoustic. So with guitar, our national instrument, cavaquinho, Portuguese heritage instrument, everything comes from that mix that happened in the radio in the 30s. It was when choro flourished in samba as well, and everything. Maybe you can play, vamos tocar chorinho para mostrar? Just to give an example, okay? Let's say a choro, a choro from the very beginning, with a lot of influence from Europe.
Não, vamos fazer outros caras.
Eu quero mostrar a passagem, a mudança. Oi. Peraí, vai. Ó, oi também. The rhythm is still on the one, very much European. You see? And then you have and then you start to put the rhythm of samba on it and the crazy melodies of jazz on top of all, and then you get something going in another direction. Quer ver o que a gente pode mostrar? Mostrar noites mesmo. Okay. composer called Jacó do Bandolim. Um assanhado. Dois, três, Sounds like blues. Time arriving to the mid-30s and 40s and Second World War, so a mess in the political distribution over the world again, and Brazil started to be very much pressured by the United States to get into the Allies, and finally did, and we went to war and everything, but it came into a coast, like Getúlio Vargas was still in power and said, all right, we can join the war, no problem, but I want the industry in Brazil. So the Americans put our first iron industry, and was the first kick, the first step for the industrial development of Brazil that started to happen for real during the 40s. And at that time, by the way, he was asking so much Getúlio Vargas that he was deposed after a while. And he came back later and committed suicide. It's a long story, but it's a beautiful story. But try to look for it, Getúlio Vargas. And at that time, there was the communication of the States with the rest of the world was doing through cinema. Cinema was very strong all around the world, as well as in Brazil. And the States were importing actors to go to Hollywood, so it could be like super gesture of goodwill. So you have movies not only with Americans, but with they did with Cantinflas in Mexico, they did with an Argentinian, I forgot the name, and they did in Brazil with Carmen Miranda. Carmen Miranda was a super samba singer, very good samba singer, and was asked to come up to the States and be one of the movie stars. And she said, all right, oh yes, I sign it right now. And then he said, all right, you're going to play with the Cuban band, was the first offer they said to her. That these guys can play very good, really good cats from LA. She said, no, I want to bring my band. And this single gesture was kind of changed Brazilian music for a long time. She went to the States with the Bando da Lua. Bando da Lua was a good samba group from Rio, really good musicians. And one of the guys that was with her was a guy called Aníbal Augusto Sardinha, the Garoto. Was a fantastic guitar player in Rio, could play samba as no one. And when he went to America, he was so much into he was doing so much scoring for Hollywood and things like that. The Musicians Union in California made a motion to expel him from the country. What they eventually did, what was great, because he came back to Brazil playing samba with a jazz accent and jazz conduction of chords, those cluster chords, things that were never understood very well in Brazil, he understood and he came back. And this was the first step towards Bossa Nova. So Bossa Nova was, we know very well by Tom Jobim and Vinícius de Moraes and all the composers, it was actually the first step was Der Garoto. Just to give an example, pode tocar uma coisa do Garoto? Uma coisa assim?
Vai tocar comigo?
Bem só?
Você vai tocar comigo?
É, você não avisar, mas... Não, toca você sozinho. Uma coisa assim.
Lamentos?
Ah, pode ser, okay. So, one typical samba called Lamentos do Morro, but play in a garoto way. You can already feel the direction of Bossa Nova that he was giving. Olha aí.
Pode acompanhar, viu?
Tá certo. So there you have, we played the song from Jobim and from Garoto, so you can feel that it's not that different, you know. So, well, cultures like this, you always dig on what came from the past and you do something of your own time. How are we in time, by the way? Still going okay? Yeah. So we have Brazilian getting very much American way of life, and with the American way of life comes, you know, products and everything. And Brazilian had already, Rio especially, had already a middle class coming up strong. It was for a long time the capital of Brazil, so lots of money pouring in. Brazil was starting to export goods. It was a very good time. If you know the geographies in Rio, you see that people were not living anymore downtown, close to the harbor, but they were going down south to the beaches, to the area that was almost a rural area, you know, Copacabana in Ipanema, the place that we know today as downtown Rio. It was actually, it was starting to be colonized by the middle class, this upbringing middle class in Brazil. And one more time comes the Brazilian way of interpreting what comes from abroad. We had there's very young musicians that were trying to play jazz. I mean young for real. They were like 18, 17, 20. They were trying to play jazz very much, but a jazz that would sound Brazilian. And as much as they try, it would always sound like a poor variation of jazz, and not a Brazilian jazz as they tried so hard to do. And then comes Bahia again to help us to go down to business, and a guy from Bahia, a guitar player, wonderful guitar player called João Gilberto, went down to Rio and started to try to, it was a young guy, he was then I think 20 when he moved to Rio, or maybe a little bit older, and he was trying to show his music in this weird form of samba he had. He had a guitar, he played the guitar with jazz chords, so very close built chords, and he was not doing the variations that everyone was doing. Brazilians like to imitate percussion when they play. He was doing something as they call the gago mesmo, the stuttered guitar. The hiccup, no, soluço, gago, stuttered guitar, because he was playing only one rhythm, and then they say, yes, that's it, jazz chords. That rhythm was like a syncretic samba, it's a samba, juice of samba in one rhythm. The rhythm was pak, tak, tak, no, what was it? Like this. So, syncopes of the samba, bass, showing the way, was a good rhythm to use. So these young guys from Copacabana, they start using that rhythm. And yes, there was another, culture. It doesn't develop only by the ideas, but also by technology. They're starting to use live microphones, something that they didn't have before. One microphone for every instrument. If you see recordings from the 30s, you see one microphone, the singer in front, and everyone trying to play around the guy like this, and the trombone player they put on the toilet there so he would not be too strong over the microphone. But technology was changing things as well. So they had one microphone for everyone, so the guy didn't have to shout when he sings. So there was also a change in aesthetics. And in Brazil, had João Gilberto was a guy who used to listen to a lot of Chet Baker, but he was not only influenced by Chet Baker, he was influenced by his own madness as well. So he started to sing very soft, and also the poetry was changing. They were not singing anymore in Brazil about the woman that went away with the circles and trapezes guy. I have to cry. No, they were singing about simple things in life, like going to the beach, taking a boat, and going for a swim, a flower. A bit boring, but it works fine with that concept. And so this was bossa nova. This was changed a lot. So vou tocar uma bossa nova, pouquinho de bossa nova.
Tem uma hora.
Já foi, né?
So, and that's coming back to politics one more time, just to make one thing. That Getúlio Vargas, that was deposed, came back to power through popular voting, to an election, and as he tried to do the famous law in Brazil, the lei antitrust, so you cannot come with a very a powerful industry cannot get into Brazil and anymore as by trust economy thing, and as well you cannot make dumpings, or you cannot export your profit. As he tried to do that, he was facing the position again, and he killed himself. So it was in 56. So one more example, and then we have a president that comes to power, and you have a very flourishing period in Brazil. Was Getúlio Vargas, a president, very popular president, moved the capital of Brazil to the countryside, so people would. What que eu falei? Getúlio de novo, eu gosto dele. Sorry, Juscelino Kubitschek was a very good guy from Diamantina, from Minas Gerais, and he had this vision that Brazil, if you don't get off the coast, you're not going to get, you're not going to become a power, a country with a powerful domain of your terrain. So he said we have to go inwards, and that was a beautiful passage, because there was a prophecy of that the new capital of the world, the new center of the world would be in the mid of the geodesical mid of South America, and he went to that spot with that. He likes to show off a little bit. So he went to that spot and found a nice place that we have today, our capital, Brasilia, where, by the way, we live. Yeah, was a prophecy from who? Was
Dom Bosco.
From Dom Bosco, yes. So it was a beautiful story. Then they had the capital dawn, so there was a new mentality, and Brazil was looking inwards. So, just to make open a parenthesis, in Brazil, when the new words, we also found out one instrument that was a bit forgotten at the time, and I would like to ask Victor to say something about this instrument. It was played everywhere in the countryside of Brazil, and in the coast. It was weird, so we found out when Brazil more of the viola.
Vou pedir para ele traduzir meu inglês. Eu costumo dizer que a viola ela veio para abrir as portas do Brasil com os jesuítas.
Yeah, it came first into Brazil with the priests, the Jesuitas priests. So
Company of Jesus.
Yeah, Company of Jesus.
E o Brasil, em uma hora não dá para falar do Brasil inteiro, né? Então, fica uma parte que a gente fica para contar. E a viola, ela não é um simples instrumento.
Yeah, viola is not only a single instrument. It's beyond that.
Ela tem uma história dentro do bojo dela, né? Porque os jesuítas foram até o Brasil para catequizar os nativos, né?
So the priests at the time from the Companhia de Jesus, they went to Brazil with the mission to convert the lost souls into Catholicism, and then they were very persuasive, and seductive. They used music a lot, not only in Brazil but also in the Missões in Paraguay. They always use a lot of the music to get into people's heart.
E a cultura popular está em volta dessa religiosidade, né? E uma das músicas da cultura popular é essa.
Yeah, and popular culture in general in Brazil evolves around religion, and he's going to and we're going to sing a tune that examples it.
Assim, nas horas que Deus começa, nas horas de Deus, amém. Nas horas de Deus, amém. Ai, ai. Deixa eu me benzer primeiro, pra livrar do mal que vem, pra livrar do mal que vem. Ai, ai. Os 3 reis em sua casa vierão lhe visitar, vierão lhe visitar. Ai, ai. This is a folia de reis, que quando chega à casa do visitante, do dono da casa, ele pede licença para entrar na casa da pessoa, cantando essas canções.
It's a folia de reis. It's a kind of procession, parade they have through the countryside village, and then they go to the house of someone just to bring some happiness, no? And that's a way of saying to ask permission to come in.
Essa
It's like
parte,
serenading, isn't it?
Like kind of serenade.
essa é a parte sagrada.
It's a secret part. Sacred part.
E tem a parte profana.
There's also the profane part.
A parte profana, eu vou pedir para vocês quando eu falar assim, aí a participação de todos.
So he's gonna ask you when yeah, você pedir?
Deixa eu lembrar a música agora, né? Vamos bater as mãos pra saudar o padroeiro, vamos bater com os pés pra dançar nesse terreiro. Sino da capelinha tá batendo, ai, ai. Vamos fazer com as palmas agora. É pá, 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 pá. Vamos lá. Pá, 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 pá. Everybody. Ok. Agora os pés. Tum, 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 tum. Tum, 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 tum. Tum, 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 tum. Tum, 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 tum. Pá, pá. Ok?
Tá muito complicado.
Agora tudo. Agora tudo, ó. 1, 2, 3, pá. Tum, 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 tum. Ok? Dizem que quem toca catira, quem dança catira, vira brasileiro. Então.
So they say that the one who danced the Caipira, this rhythm, turns into Brazilian.
Vamos bater com as mãos pra saudar o padroeiro. Vamos bater com os pés pra dançar nesse terreiro. Sino da capelinha tá batendo, ai, ai. Outra vez. Vamos bater com as mãos pra saudar o padroeiro. Vamos bater com os pés pra dançar nesse terreiro. Sino da capelinha tá batendo, ai, ai. Very good.
Acho que eu não consegui fazer esse negócio.
Esse instrumento data a partir de 1300.
So the instrument comes from the 14th century.
Não. Ele instrumento achou os números de cordas.
So have less strings and frets.
É.
E foram usados corda de aço.
E também a característica da viola também é o acordamento de aço, ou seja, ele é também chamada como viola de arame.
It's also, cara.
Metal wire.
Metal.
Metal wire.
Yeah. you know, the thing of the barbed wire. So that metal, it's called the viola, made out of this metal. So also because they use it, really simple metal to do that. And we always say that the viola caipira is an open gate to the deepness of Brazil, you know.
E para a gente resumir, né, essa história toda, porque o tempo também já está escasso, a viola hoje ela tomou um lugar diferente no âmbito brasileiro, porque o violão chegou com um método já pronto em 1800 e já tomou conta das pessoas, né, para as pessoas tocarem, enquanto a viola
we used to play before, no, like the viola. Now there's a coming back of it. There's a revival. That instrument is very strong, and people are playing all sorts of styles in Brazil with the viola, even jazz, modern music, classical music. They're playing with the viola.
como por exemplo o bolero de Ravel.
Opa. I'm going to try just to conclude a little bit because the time is running so fast. Normally we get into the Brazilian rock, but you're not, luckily for you, you're not going to get that far. So just to, you know, Brazilian music has been always, through its beginning, has been kind of reflecting and giving an input into society a lot. And when Bossa Nova was their style in that time, late 50s, in the 60s, it got a little bit far from the reality. Maybe because it was the first was overthrown by the militaries, and then music was again a form of protesting, so it came back to its old nature, that was to reflect and to give an input in society. And then, but then it didn't come from the people, from the most lowest strata of society, financially speaking, but they came from that same middle class that was a little bit fed up with Bossa Nova and those talking about flowers and everything. They started to talk about politics again, and there was like a rebirth of the engagement through music. And we had also, there was the protest songs, and we had Tropicalia, that was the first glimpse of globalization in Brazilian culture. You know, they were taking guitars and say, okay, we can play popular music with guitars just like the Yankees do, and they did it very good. The Brazilian rock was also coming up, and now we wonder, everyone in Brazil wonders what will be our country from now on. It's too late to develop our own personality, or we get glued to the rest of the world, you know, and so I hope to be back, we hope to be back in 10 years to talk about that.
Falando sobre funk.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. You know, there was a new thing in Brazil and in the rest of the world, the cultural industry, you know. First of all, before we had one nice guy in a record company that say, oh, I love that record, let's promote that guy. And now, no, it's a marketing you have to discuss, and they are very afraid of coming up with something new, as in most of corporations, you know. So the ideas are always a renewal of an old idea, what can sell the most. So Brazil is suffering from this. But if in the upper level it's quite commercial and not as rich as before, in the deep level everything is happening. It's a lot of culture going on there, like the rebirth of the viola and things like that. So Brazil is still very alive.
And also many groups that are playing this kind of traditional songs that were a little bit forgotten in this traditional festivities in the inland, and that's the kind of thing that we like to play with Camerata Caipira, to show more than samba and bossa nova.
Like Camerata Caipira, the name Camerata from Camerata, so we are the scholars of the thing. And
we are the Caipiras.
We just got together to make music. Anyway, we would like very much to thank the embassy for this opportunity. It was wonderful to be able to talk about our culture. And
we would like to thank Fundo de Apoio à Cultura that made it possible for us to be here. Support
and reminding that tomorrow at 8 we have the concert. And would like if you have any question, any comment, or any doubt.
So okay, now we'll have dinner, so that's why Karina brought us.
So, manda ver.
Ele sugeriu tocar a Saudade dela.
Boa. So I'm going to end with a rhythm that goes back to the beginning of the talk, to the samba de roda, that the most pure form of samba you know. Roda means circle, so it's a samba played in a circle, everyone looking at the other acts.
E retrata também a viola dentro do samba.
And that's a rhythm played a lot with the viola in the samba. Manda ver.
Vai tocar não? Pega essa viola.
Saudade dela, ela se foi, saudade, fiquei sem ela, oi, ai, ai, saudade, saudade dela, ela se foi, saudade, fiquei sem ela, fonte de sabedoria, onde tudo podia achar, todo canto matriz é gente do meu lugar, quando eu era canarinho, hoje canto sozinho e dela sempre vou lembrar. Oi, olha o tombo do pau, ai, ai, olha o tombo do pau, ai, ai, olha o tombo do pau, ai, ai, olha o tombo do pau.
Ai, ai, saudade, saudade dela, ela se foi, saudade, fiquei sem ela, oi, ai, ai, saudade, saudade dela, ela se foi, saudade, fiquei sem ela, do nosso convívio saiu, já se dizia cansada, deixou um largo sorriso e um doce canto de paz. Tantas alegrias vividas naquele prato, mistura de amor e poesia, mesa de luxo era ouro brilhante e prata. Ai, ai, saudade, saudade dela, ela se foi, saudade, fiquei sem ela, oi, ai, ai, saudade, saudade dela, ela se foi, saudade, fiquei sem ela. Da casa me dá licença pra eu sambar na varanda, com um chapéu na cabeça e um sacão de banda. Dona da casa me dá licença, me desce o salão para vadiar, me desce o salão para vadiar, me desce o salão para vadiar. Eu vim aqui, eu vim vadiar, eu vim aqui, eu vim vadiar. Vadeia, 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 pomba na areia, vadeia, 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 pomba na areia, oh.
Ai, ai, saudade, saudade dela, ela se foi, saudade,
agradecer também aos amigos e amigas que estão aqui apoiando a gente, né? A Valéria, a Alda, né? E outros vários amigos que nós fizemos aqui. Muito obrigado pela oportunidade, Karina. Obrigado.
Obrigado. We hope to see you tomorrow. So tomorrow at 8 at the
Downstage.
Downstage.
Yes, and also Saturday at San Francisco Back House, we are going to be playing with different bands, Wellington-based bands.